Good morning, my friends from Landenberg, Pennsylvania. Welcome back to Reluctant Chaplain Bible Study. We are in Ephesians chapter 6 today. We're starting chapter 6, which is the final chapter of Ephesians. In fact, today's episode 45, episode 46 should be the last one for Ephesians. We'll be done. So I'm looking for suggestions for the next study. So if you guys want to message me, text me, put it in the comments, whatever study you want to see me do next, let me know. I hope you enjoyed last week. We only had like 15 views or 13 views for having Professor Hicks on here, which was mighty low. If you didn't watch that one, you really should. Professor Hicks always has such great insights on this stuff, and he's my go-to lifeline when I put these studies together. Anyway, starting with Paul's letter to the Ephesian church or the area around the Ephesian church, and the believers in that area. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 9 today. As per usual, I will start with the ESV Reformation Study Bible version and then the NET Full Notes version for a little more clarity into the modern language. Okay, here we go. Chapter 6. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ, not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a bondservant or is free. Masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no partiality with him. Don't you gotta put the bookmark in. Gotta put the bookmark in. Okay, on to the NET. Here we go. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment accompanied by a promise, namely, that it will go well with you and that you will live a long time on the earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but raise them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Slaves, obey your human masters with fear and trembling, in the sincerity of your heart as to Christ, not like those who do their work only when someone is watching, as people pleasers, but as slaves of Christ doing the will of God from the heart. Obey with enthusiasm as though serving the Lord and not people, because you know that each person, whether slave or free, if he does something good, this will be rewarded by the Lord. Masters, treat your slaves the same way, giving up the use of threats, because you know that both you and they have the same master in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him. Wow, the NET really just seems so much more clear on that one. I got to give the point to the NET on that one. All right, pardon me while I gather my notes here. And you're probably not curious, but I script this out in advance, and that's why I always see my head down and reading. I am not at a point where I can just riff this stuff. I'm not a born pastor or anything like that. So, all right, here we go. So most of the study is going to be largely taken from the Believer's Bible Commentary. I relied on it 100% for this one. I didn't even crack open my other commentaries on this one. Um, Maybe I was lazy. Probably lazy. All right, chapter 5 spent a lot of time expounding on how one of the results of being filled with the Holy Spirit is being submissive to one another. And now we see how spirit filled children are submissive to their parents. The commentary observes that it is the fundamental duty of all children to obey their parents in the Lord. It doesn't make any difference if they are believers or not. The parent child relationship was ordained for all of mankind, not just for believers. The command to obey in the Lord first means that in doing so, they are obeying God. Their obedience should be as if to Him. Second, it means that they should obey in all matters that are in accordance to the will of God. Pardon the rustling. If the parents ordered them to sin, they should not be expected to comply. Obviously, they should courteously refuse and take the consequences meekly and without retaliation. but in all other cases, obedience is expected. Four reasons are given here as to why this is so. First, it is right. It's a basic principle built into family life that those who are immature and inexperienced should submit to the authorities of those who have been there and done that. The second is scriptural. Paul quotes Exodus 20:12. Honor your father and mother. It's the first of the Ten Commandments with a specific blessing attached to it, a promise of blessing. And it calls for children to respect, love, and obey their parents. Third, it is in the best interest of a child to receive instruction and correction from their parents. No child turns out well who's just left to free form and just kind of freestyle it. And fourth, obedience promotes a full life. In the Old Testament times, a Jewish child who obeyed his parents did live a long life. In this gospel age, however, it's not a rule without exceptions. Filial obedience doesn't necessarily mean longevity, but a life of discipline and obedience is conducive to health and longevity, whereas rebellion and recklessness often leads to an untimely end. Well, I can attest to that. I didn't get the untimely end, but I came close a couple times. Now, the instructions to children are balanced out here with instructions to parents, fathers specifically. They are not to provoke or burden their children with unreasonable demands, undue harshness, constant negative input, etc. They should be nurtured in the admonition and training of the Lord. Actually, it says training and admonition of the Lord. Training meaning discipline or correction, that's either verbal or corporal, and admonition meaning warnings or rebukes. And this is carried out in accordance with God's will by one who acts as God's representative. You know, it's your responsibility as a father, as a parent, to bring your children up in the Lord. There's a great quote here that I'm going to read, and the quote is from Susanna Wesley, who I believe was the mother of John and Charles Wesley. If you never heard those names, you ever heard the Wesleyan Church? They were hymn writers and theologians. She had 17 children. And the quote is this: the parent who studies to subdue self will in his child works together with God in the renewing and saving of his soul. The parents who indulge it does the devil's work, makes religion impractical, salvation unattainable, and does all that in him lies to damn his child's soul and body forever. That's pretty heavy, but accurate. That's why I read it. All right. The next and final sphere of submission addressed by Paul is of servants to masters. Now, Paul uses a word here that means bondservants or slaves, and it's not the same kind of chattel slavery that was prevalent in the early part of United States history and United Kingdom history as well. If you have questions about that, I can send you some links that will explain it much better than I can. Some really excellent stuff. So just message me, text me, call me, whatever, and let me know that that's what you want, and I'll be happy to send you stuff like that to better explain the differences there. These principles apply to servants or employees of all types. The first duty of the employee or servant or slave is to those who have jurisdiction over physical or mental work. They cannot, however, dictate in spiritual matters or command the conscience. So while they can tell you what to do, they can't tell you what to believe or to go against the will of God. Second, they should be respectful. Fear and trembling does not mean a cowering servility here or abject terror. It implies a dutiful respect and a desire not to offend the Lord or the employer. And third, service should be sincere of heart or of conscientiousness. Okay. Next, we should work as if we were working for God. And this one's really important, man. This is one that really hits me, something that I really have to remember when I'm doing things. All that we do, we should do for God. All we do, we should do for Him. The most glorious and ignoble tasks, the most inglorious and ignoble tasks they're ennobled and dignified if they're done for the glory of God. We should always be diligent, working with the same effort and integrity, even if we aren't supervised, because God is always supervising. Our work should be done with goodwill, not with an outward display of goodwill while we're full of resentment inside, seething rage or whatever. Even if a master is insufferable, overbearing, unreasonable, abusive, just downright unlikable, we're to work as if we're working for God, not for man. And here, well, going back to the slavery thing here, there's some really important observations in the New Testament about slavery. that I want to include here, and I'm going to read directly from the commentary on this, word for word, because I think they're really good and they're really important. Important. All right. So the New Testament does not condemn slavery as such. In fact, it likens the true believer to a slave, bondservant of Christ. But the abuses of slavery have disappeared wherever the gospel has gone, mainly by moral reformation. And this is true. Look at where it started in England. Look who those guys were. One of them wrote Amazing Grace. The New Testament has more to say to slaves than it has to kings. This may be a reflection of the fact that not many wise, mighty, or noble are called. And that's check 1 Corinthians 1 through 26 for that. Probably most Christians are found in the lower economic and social brackets. The emphasis on slaves also shows that the most menial servants are not excluded from the choicest blessings of Christianity. And then the last point here, the effectiveness of these instructions to slaves is seen in the fact that in the early days of Christianity, Christian slaves frequently brought higher prices at the auction than heathen bondservants. It should be true today that Christian employers are worth more to their employees than those who have never been touched by the grace of God. I just thought that was interesting and should be included in there. Okay, finally, masters should be guided by the same general principles as servants. They should be fair, kind, honest, no abusive or threatening language. They also need to remember that they have a master as well, and it's that same master that the slave has. Earthly distinctions are leveled out in the presence of God, and both are going to have to give their account to Him one day. So that will bring us to the last half of the chapter. Next week we will do verse 10 through to the finish, which I believe is verse 24. So we're going to do 10 through 24 next week. We're going to finish Ephesians. If you have any suggestions for what you want me to do after this, and yes, Mrs. V, and I know you're going to say Revelations, but I'm still not ready to do Revelations yet. So anything but Revelations, let me know, and we'll see how it pans out. And that was what was that? Batteries are rolling across the floor. It's never a good sign. Yeah, anyway, thank you for being here for number 45. Thank you guys for your support. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We've got 50 subscribers, which is about 47 more than I expected. But let's keep it going. If you know anybody that might be interested, they're sort of seeking or whatever, and want a friendly, low-key Bible study, maybe this would be good for them. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. Please pray that I don't mishandle God's word, and because that's what I pray every time I do these, that I'm going to handle this faithfully and not make a mess of it and mislead anybody. That is a terrifying, terrifying fear that I have. Anyway, love you guys, and I will see you for episode 46. God bless. Take care.